Before we start, let me say this from the bottom of my heart. Thank you for being here with Revenge House USA. Your presence doesn't just keep this story alive, it helps those who were once abandoned find their voice again. Every like, every comment, every time you hit subscribe, becomes a hand reaching out to someone drowning in the dark. Thank you for helping build a community that heals, protects, and lifts people up. Aya's daughter. Now, let me tell you about the night my childhood ended. I was only 16, a 10th grader, my belly just starting to show small enough to hide under an old hoodie. That night, the temperature dropped to 26 degrees Fahrenheit, and the wind cut across my face like a blade. I stood in our living room, hands shaking, gripping the edge of the table to keep myself steady. My father, Mitchell Price, slammed my pregnancy test papers onto the table so hard the sound exploded through the room. "Delaney, you've destroyed this family's honor." I tried to speak, my voice trembling violently. "Dad, I just need time, My mother, Clara, screamed sharp, cold like shattering glass. "No, get out of this house, tonight." I remember her eyes clearly not angry, but disgusted, and that hurt more than the cold waiting outside. My father didn't wait another second. He opened the front door, grabbed my arm, and dragged me out. I slipped on the icy steps, my knees smashing against the ground. The door slammed behind me, the lock turning with a harsh click. A sound that felt like a death sentence. I knocked. 3 times. 4. No answer. I whispered through the crack in the door, desperate. "Please, I'm scared. Don't do this to me." Inside, the lights went off one by one. As if I had never existed, I stepped backward into the yard, hugging my stomach, my fingers numb and burning from the cold. The wind whipped my wet hair across my face. I tried calling my boyfriend, Theo Ramirez. My phone buzzed once, then died. His only message glowed on the screen. "Don't contact me again. My family won't allow it." My chest caved in. I wanted to collapse right there, to scream, to disappear. But then, through the freezing air slicing into my skin, I felt a tiny movement inside my belly. A soft kick, gentle as a ripple in water. I placed my hand over my stomach, tears hot against my frozen cheeks. "Baby, I'm not leaving you. I swear." I walked away from that house 3 blocks through the snow, every step like walking across blades. No blanket, no money, no family, just me, and the little life fighting to survive with me. And that moment that night I was kicked out at 16 became the beginning of a rebirth disguised as revenge. And today, because you're here watching this, my story gets to be told to save girls who shouldn't have to suffer what I did. Thank you for being here. Don't miss the next part where everything gets darker, heavier, and becomes the first spark of the biggest twist of my life. The night I was kicked out in 10th grade didn't end when the door slammed shut. It only got darker. I walked aimlessly through Little Pines, this tiny mountain town where every porch light felt like a reminder that someone else had a home, and I didn't. Snow piled up on the sidewalks, crunching under my shoes that were already soaking through. My fingers stung. My lips were cracked. My hoodie was no match for the 26 degrees Fahrenheit wind slicing across my skin. By the time I reached the bus depot 3 blocks away, I couldn't feel my toes. The place was half lit, half forgotten. A man in a heavy jacket glanced at me, then looked away quickly. People always look away when you're young, pregnant, and alone. Like pain might be contagious. I lowered myself onto a metal bench, ice cold. It burned through my jeans. I curled forward, holding my stomach like it was the only warm thing left in the world. And maybe it was. A contraction hit not real labor, but the sharp tightening of a terrified 16-year-old under extreme cold and stress. I gasped and covered my mouth so no one would stare. No one did. No one even noticed. For a moment, I thought about walking back home. Maybe crying outside the door would soften them. Maybe my mom would open it. Maybe she'd say she didn't mean it. Maybe, but I wasn't stupid. I saw her face. I saw the truth. I wasn't her daughter anymore. I was her shame. I pulled my knees closer and whispered into the fabric of my sleeve, Please don't let anything happen to my baby." The words came out broken, disappearing into the cold air. My phone back then, a cheap flip phone, lit up for a moment. My heart jumped. It was Theo. But instead of calling, he texted. A single message. Don't drag me into this. My parents said stay away. Stay away. Those two words hit harder than the cold, harder than my mother's scream. My vision blurred not from tears, but from the kind of heartbreak that steals your breath before you even realize you've stopped breathing. I leaned back, staring up at the flickering depot light. If it went out, I think I might have disappeared with it. Hours passed. Or maybe minutes. I couldn't tell. Every now and then, a gust of wind lifted the snow and slapped it across my face. I pressed my hands under my thighs trying to warm them, but the cold was winning. My body shook uncontrollably. And then, a terrifying thought crept in. What if I don't make it through this night? What happens to my baby? Does anyone even know we're out here? Does anyone care? I swallowed hard, the fear climbing up my throat. When the depot clock struck midnight, the world felt completely silent, so quiet it made my ears ring. I wasn't just alone. I was forgotten. But something inside me, something small but fierce, refused to die with that night. I pressed my hand to my stomach again. I'm still here, I whispered. For you, I'm still here. Even if no one else was. By sunrise, I wasn't sure if I was still conscious or just drifting between pain and cold. My legs were stiff. My hands were pale and slow to move. My breath came out in tiny clouds that vanished as quickly as my hope. That metal bench felt like it was welded into my spine. I was 16, pregnant, homeless, and completely invisible. When the depot door opened, I expected another stranger to walk past me, maybe throw a judging glance, maybe pretend they didn't see me. But the woman who stepped in, she froze. She looked right at me. Not through me. At me. She was older, maybe in her late 50s, wearing a burgundy wool coat and a knitted scarf. Her hair was streaked with silver, pulled into a low bun. She carried a box of donated books in her arms. Her eyes narrowed, not with anger, but concern. Sweetheart, she said softly, setting the box down. How long have you been out here? My throat tightened painfully. I wanted to answer, but the words stuck, frozen behind my teeth. She didn't wait. She shrugged off her scarf and wrapped it gently around my shoulders. The warmth felt like a shock, like suddenly remembering what kindness was. My name is Grace Holloway, she said. I own the used bookstore across the street. Let's get you someplace warm, okay? Warm. It sounded like a dream. I shook my head weakly. I don't have money. She blinked, almost offended by the thought. Money, she repeated. Child, I'm not charging you. I'm helping you. Something inside me cracked, then something I'd held tight since the night my parents locked the door. My eyes burned, vision blurring. Not from the cold this time. Grace helped me stand, steadying me by the elbow. My legs buckled and she wrapped an arm around my back without hesitation, like she'd done it 1,000 times for other lost souls. When we stepped into her bookstore, warmth washed over me like a tidal wave. The air smelled of paper, cinnamon, and old wood. She led me to a small sofa in the corner, placed a blanket over my lap, and handed me a steaming cup of cocoa. I hadn't tasted anything so warm in months. Tell me your name, she said gently. Delaney, I whispered. And the little one? Her eyes flicked to my stomach. I hesitated, then placed my hand over it. She doesn't have a name yet. Grace smiled, the kind of smile that feels like sunlight on skin. Well, Delaney, you and your baby are safe here for now. No one's going to throw you out of this place. That sentence hit deeper than she knew. Safe. For now. For the first time since my parents' rejection. Why are you helping me? I asked. Grace leaned back in her chair. Because someone helped me once. And because you deserve a chance to stand up again. I looked around the bookstore, the yellow lamps, the rows of worn novels, the quiet hum of an old heater, and realized something. This wasn't just shelter. It was the first sliver of hope in a world that had tried to freeze me out. And I wasn't letting it slip away. Hope didn't change my life overnight, but it gave me permission to try. Grace Holloway let me stay in the tiny loft above her bookstore, a narrow space with one window, a squeaky bed, and a heater that groaned louder than a freight train. But to me, it felt like a palace. It was the first door that opened for me rather than slam shut in my face. And when my daughter was born in the spring of 1999, tiny, fragile, wrapped in a hospital blanket that smelled like detergent and new beginnings, Grace held her like she was her own blood. "What's her name?" she whispered. "Sienna," I said. "Her name is Sienna." From that moment, something shifted inside me. A fire. A vow. A force I didn't know I had. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was rebuilding. The work began. Grace gave me a part-time job sorting donations at the bookstore. It paid barely anything, but I learned every corner of that shop: how to catalog books, how to talk to customers, how to keep inventory clean, how to run a register, and more importantly, how to stand tall even when people stared at a teenage mom with judgment in their eyes. At night, once Sienna fell asleep in her little crib by the window, I sat on the floor with a flashlight and studied for my GED. I didn't have a desk, so I used a stack of old encyclopedias as a table. I failed my first practice exam, then the second, then the third. Each time, Grace would put a cup of warm tea beside me and say, "Progress isn't linear, sweetheart. It's stubborn, just like you." And she was right. By the end of 2001, I passed my GED. I cried holding that paper because it wasn't just a certificate. It was proof that the girl who had been left to freeze at a bus depot was still fighting. The shift to power. In 2002, I enrolled at Front Range Community College, taking night classes in accounting while working at the bookstore during the day. Money was tight, so tight that I sometimes skipped meals to make sure Sienna had enough. But every time I thought about quitting, I'd look at her. Her big brown eyes. Her tiny fingers gripping mine. Her soft breathing at night. And I kept going. In 2004, I got my first real job offer, an entry-level bookkeeping position at a small tech repair shop in Boulder. I rode the bus 40 minutes each way with Sienna in tow, dropping her off at daycare Grace paid half for. The job was chaotic: paperwork piles taller than me, customers yelling, numbers everywhere. But numbers made sense. They didn't lie, they didn't judge, they didn't abandon. And I was good at them. By 2005, the owner promoted me to manage the entire financial side of the business. I went home that night, put Sienna on my lap, and whispered, "We're getting out of this town someday, you'll see." Because for the first time, I wasn't the girl who had been kicked out in 10th grade. I was a woman learning how to rise. Slowly, stubbornly. One ledger, one night class, one sacrifice at a time. And I had no idea that my greatest rise was still years away, and that my daughter would one day become the reason my past would come crashing back. By 2005, I had climbed out of the ditch life shoved me into. Not gracefully, not easily, but relentlessly. Managing the finances for that tech repair shop in Boulder opened doors I never thought existed. Through every spreadsheet, every tax season, every late-night ledger, I learned something. Power begins with understanding what other people overlook. And I saw everything: patterns, weaknesses, opportunities. By the time I turned 23, a local entrepreneur named Adrian Cole approached me after reviewing a proposal I'd rewritten for my employer. "You don't belong in a repair shop," he told me. "You belong in a boardroom." No. The words hit me harder than any insult my parents ever threw at me. Because he said it like it was a fact, not a compliment. Adrian hired me as a junior financial analyst for his startup in Denver, a tiny company that built tools for small businesses. I took buses, trains, rides, anything to get there while raising a toddler. And I worked like a woman still running from the cold night she almost froze to death. 3 years later, I became the head of finance. 5 years later, I became a partner. 6 years later, I opened my own firm, Price Analytics and Solutions, a company I built from a rented room with peeling walls and a folding table that wobbled. By 2017, it grew into a multi-million-dollar operation, serving clients across 3 states. Success didn't feel like fireworks. It felt like finally taking a full breath after years of drowning. And through all this, Sienna, my Sienna, grew into a brilliant, guarded, fiercely observant young woman. She loved computers the way I loved numbers. She earned scholarships, won cybersecurity competitions, and got a job offer before she even finished college. She was my pride, my proof, my miracle. But even miracles come with shadows. The past begins to move. Around 2020, Sienna started spending late nights on her laptop long after her work hours ended. When I asked, she brushed it off with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Just projects, Mom. Nothing big. But I knew that tone. I used it when I wanted to protect her. I should have pressed harder. I didn't. And then came 2023. The year everything I had built, every brick, every sacrifice was dragged into the courtroom by the two people who had abandoned me when I was 16. I'll never forget the letter that arrived. A thick envelope. My name typed neatly on the front. Inside, my parents Clara and Mitchell Price were suing me for 35% of my company's wealth, claiming I owed them because they raised and supported me until adulthood. Adulthood. I laughed. A sharp, broken sound. They hadn't supported me past age 16. They barely supported me before that. But the lawsuit was real. Their demands were real. Their greed was real. And for the first time in decades, I felt the cold again. The same cold as the night I was kicked out. I sat at my desk, hands trembling for the first time in years. When Sienna walked in. Calm, focused, almost prepared. Mom, she said softly, I need to tell you something. She placed her laptop on my desk, and with a trembling breath I realized my daughter had known this day was coming, and she had been preparing for it. For years. Sienna placed her laptop on my desk with the kind of quiet confidence that didn't belong to a 24-year-old. Not unless she had seen things, prepared things, carried things. She took a breath. Mom, I've been investigating Grandma and Grandpa for 3 years. The room went still. My heartbeat didn't stop, but it staggered. Investigating? My voice cracked. Sienna, what are you talking about? She opened her laptop. Lines of code, files, logs, things I didn't fully understand flashed across the screen. I knew, she said, eyes steady, that one day they'd come back. People like them only want 2 things: control and profit. The moment your company became successful, I started tracking any attempt they made to dig into your life. I stared at her. Why didn't you tell me? Her lips trembled. Because I didn't want you to live in fear again. She clicked a folder labeled Project Winterlight. Inside were dozens, no, hundreds of files. Receipts, bank statements, emails between my parents and a lawyer, a recorded phone call between them discussing timing the lawsuit during tax season to pressure her, an old neighbor's written testimony describing how they watched my parents shove me outside in the snow in 1998. My hands flew to my mouth. Sienna, how did you… Mom, she whispered. I work in cybersecurity. These weren't hard to find. They were sloppy, arrogant, and they thought you'd be alone when they came after you. She clicked again. A video clip loaded. Security camera footage. Grainy. Time-stamped the 12th of December 1998. The night my childhood ended. It showed me 16, shaking, crying, being pushed out the front door. My mother yelling. My father locking the door behind me. My knees buckled at the sight. I hadn't seen that night through anyone else's eyes in 25 years. But here it was. Undeniable. Cold. Permanent. Sienna moved beside me, placing a gentle hand on my back. I got this from the man who lived across the street. He passed away last year. His grandson digitized his VHS tapes. She swallowed hard. I asked him if he had anything from that winter. I couldn't speak. Sienna, you've been doing all this, alone? She nodded, jaw tight. They tried to erase you, Mom. I made sure the world could see the truth. Then she opened one last document. A timeline of every lie, every inconsistency, every illegal tax maneuver my parents had committed over the past 15 years. My breath hitched. Why did you do all this? Sienna looked at me, eyes burning with the same fire I felt all those years ago the moment she kicked inside me on that freezing night. Because you protected me, she said softly. Now it's my turn. My throat closed. This wasn't just a daughter. This was the warrior my pain had raised. The proof that love survives where cruelty fails. She closed the laptop gently. Mom, she said, we're not going to play defense in court. She lifted her chin. We're going to win. And in that moment, for the first time since the lawsuit arrived, I believed her. The courthouse smelled like cold marble and old battles. Every footstep echoed louder than it should have, as if the building itself knew a storm was coming. I walked in beside Sienna, her laptop in hand, her posture straight, steady, unshakable. Across the aisle, my parents sat with their attorney polished, smug, rehearsed. My mother's lips curled into something like pity, as if I were the one who had ruined their lives. When the judge, Harper Bowen, entered, the room fell into silence thick enough to choke on. My parents' attorney stood first. "Your Honor, we are here today because Clara and Mitchell Price gave their daughter 25 years of support, investment, and parental care. Sienna muttered under her breath. "Here we go, fantasy hour." The attorney continued, "And therefore they rightfully seek compensation from Miss Delaney Price's considerable financial success." Considerable? The word tasted like metal in my mouth. Judge Bowen nodded. "Miss Price, do you have representation?" I stood. "Your Honor, I'll speak for myself, but my daughter will present evidence." My parents exchanged confused glances. Their lawyer stiffened. The judge gestured. "Proceed." Sienna connected her laptop to the courtroom monitor. The first image she displayed wasn't a document. It was a freeze frame. Timestamp, December 12, 1980. Me, 16. Standing outside in the snow. Crying. Pleading. The room inhaled sharply. Then Sienna hit play. The footage came alive. My mother shoving me out the door. My father yelling. The lock clicking. The porch light switching off. My mother gasped, "This is taken out of context." Judge Bowen raised a hand. "You will remain silent until asked to speak." Sienna's voice was clear. This video was recorded by their neighbor, Mr. Hendricks. It was preserved by his grandson, digitized last year. It is authentic. My parents' attorney shot to his feet. "Objection. Overruled," the judge said. Sienna clicked again. And this time she brought the avalanche. Emails discussing how to time the lawsuit to drain her funds. Phone recordings where my father said, "She owes us. She wouldn't have survived without our roof." Tax documents proving they'd committed fraud for over a decade. A handwritten statement from a social worker who visited our home in 1999 after a concerned citizen reported suspected neglect. My parents looked smaller with each file. Sienna wasn't finished. She pulled out one last piece. A notarized testimony from my former school counselor, who remembered the bruises on my arms from being dragged out. The attorney stuttered. "Your Honor, we had no knowledge." Judge Bowen slammed the gavel. "I have seen enough." He turned to my parents, eyes sharp with disgust. "Clara and Mitchell Price, your lawsuit is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, based on the evidence provided, this court is referring your actions to the district attorney for investigation into tax fraud, child endangerment, and perjury." My mother's face collapsed. My father's jaw trembled. Judge Bowen leaned forward. "You abandoned your minor daughter in winter conditions. You then attempted to exploit her future success for personal gain. This court will not tolerate such actions." Then she looked at me. "Miss Price, I commend your resilience." My chest tightened. For the first time in 25 years, someone in authority had said those words to me not to judge, but to acknowledge. The gavel struck one final time. Case closed. Sienna squeezed my hand. "Mom?" she whispered. "Yes? I told you we'd win." And in that moment, I realized she hadn't saved me. We had saved each other. The morning after the trial, Denver felt different. Maybe it was the same city, same skyline, same winter air, same traffic humming down Colfax Avenue, but something inside me had shifted. For the first time since I was 16, I woke up without fear sitting on my chest. Sienna was in the kitchen, barefoot, hair tied in a messy bun, sipping coffee like she hadn't just dismantled 2 grown adults in federal court. When she saw me, she lifted her mug. "Morning, Mom," she smiled. My heart softened in a way I can't explain. "Morning," I whispered back. We sat across from each other at the small table, the sunlight spilling in through the window, turning her eyes golden. "You okay?" she asked. I nodded slowly. Better than okay. And for the first time it was true. The release. I expected to feel triumphant, victorious, vindicated. But instead, I felt light. The kind of light that comes after setting down a boulder you've been carrying so long, you forgot it wasn't a part of your body. My parents weren't in my life anymore, not physically, not legally, not emotionally. Their shadow had finally peeled off my skin. And as strange as it sounds, I didn't want revenge. Not anymore. I wanted peace. I wanted purpose. I wanted to make sure no other 16-year-old girl ever had to feel the kind of cold I did that night. The foundation. That week, Sienna and I filed paperwork to open a nonprofit. We called it the Winterlight Foundation, a support network for homeless and abandoned teen mothers. Winterlight because the cold tried to end me. But light saved me. Grace Holloway's bookstore became our first donation center. She cried when we told her the name. Then she said the words that wrapped around my heart like a warm blanket. You turned suffering into shelter, Delaney. That's how you end a cycle, not by fighting it, but by rewriting it. Our foundation grew faster than we expected. Shelters, mentorship programs, grants for education, mental health support. Women from all over Colorado reached out to volunteer. Some were mothers. Some were daughters. Some were survivors. All of them knew what it meant to lose everything and still rise. The truth about legacy. One evening, months later, I stood outside Grace's bookstore, watching the lights glow across the snow-covered street. The same snow that once nearly killed me now looked gentle, almost beautiful. Sienna came up beside me, sliding her hands into her coat pockets. You ever think about going back? She asked softly. To see them? I didn't have to ask who she meant. I watched my breath fade into the cold air. No, I finally said. Because some doors close so we can walk toward better ones. She leaned her head on my shoulder. I'm proud of you, Mom. I smiled, eyes stinging. I'm proud of us. Because the truth is, I didn't win alone. My legacy wasn't my business or my money. It was her. My daughter. My witness. My defender. My miracle. The baby they tried to erase became the woman who helped rebuild me. And together, we turned a night of abandonment into a lifetime of purpose.